I am here near some spectacular rock and ice climbing in Jackson, New Hampshire on Wabanaki, Abenaki, and Pequawket ancestral lands with Majka Burhardt. Majka, you are the fourth woman to receive any certification from the AMGA, and you are a rock and ice certified guide. You have founded Legado, a nonprofit that leverages biodiversity to promote resilience among indigenous communities in Africa and in Peru. And you are also a parent of twins. Last year, your memoir of your journey into parenthood as a climber was published. I picked up your book more when my son was 16 months old, and there is not a page that I don't relate to. And I want to thank you on behalf of our community for putting that out there. And also thank you for having us here today.
You bet. I'm so glad that we're doing this, and I'm glad that more mattered.
Your story is unique in part because you are the parent of twins. When you found out you were pregnant with twins, what was that like, and how did you expect your professional and personal life to change?
I think most of us go into parenthood overestimating our abilities. I think that's like a human tendency. Otherwise, who would become a parent, right? We all have to believe that it's possible. So for me, I thought I could be a parent and I could keep, being a pro climber and guiding and running Legado. And then when I found I was pregnant with twins, I felt like the record scratch. And it's to say, oh, wait, whoa, this was not part of the plan. How the heck am I going to do that with two babies at once? It really was the moment for me to say, oh no, what have I done? Right? Like, I want this, but what have I done and how do I do it? And the only thing I could do at that point was to say, I will figure it out. Right? Like, it wasn't, I must change my life. It was, let's see how this works. And let's just be determined to both be open, but also to be stubborn as hell.
Mm-hmm. You describe a moment in More where you're at Outdoor Retailer, our industry trade show, when you're pregnant, and you shared with a few people that you were pregnant with twins. The responses that you described were not overly optimistic about your future climbing career.
Yeah.
Your kids are 7 now?
Yep.
How do you feel about that now?
When I shared that I was pregnant with twins, they just standoffish, well, you're done, you're screwed, say goodbye to your career, that sort of situation, was comical because it had to be comical to me because otherwise it would have been so deeply insulting. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I think that now I'm 8 years past getting pregnant, and it just looks different, right? It's not over, it looks different. But the thing that I'll tell you, Allison, and that I feel like we leave out of the narrative so much, is it always looks different for people 8 years later. Like, I had children and my life changed. But there's lots of other ways that lives, you get injured, you have like different financial realities. And so I think this concept that climbing is you devote your life to climbing and then things happen and they happen in order and they happen on a hockey stick curve. We need to rattle that loose.
I agree. And I do think parenting poses unique challenges to getting out to climb. And I'm wondering for you, could you point to a few of those unique challenges for our audience, maybe who don't have children yet?
I mean, it's insane, right? Like, climbing already is a very time-heavy commitment. And I've known that for my entire life while it's been the focus of my life. You add having children and it becomes just sort of imbalanced how much time it takes. Who's going to take care of your kids when you go climbing? Are your kids going to be in the mood? Are they going to have vomited on you the whole night? Are they going to be in a place where they're super emotional and it's actually not okay for you to go climbing? By the time you go climbing, are you just really tired or fried because of like the level of on you had to be as a parent? How do you understand risk? How do you understand risk inside the calculus of the responsibilities you have? Yeah, it's climbing and parenthood. I think that we have a really amazing moment right now to break open the dialogue around that. And in part, that's because there's a heck of a lot more women who are inside of that dialogue. And you weren't just climbing and parenthood exists because there's a sort of silent parent taking care of the child, right? Now it's like, what do you do when everybody is a climber? And how does that then work going forward?
I also think it has to do with financial capacity of women to promote stories when traditionally women have been primary caretakers.
Absolutely.
And so I'm hoping that, your book and this series will help promote, those conversations. You mentioned in our conversations about redefining climbing now that you're a parent. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
When I climb, I feel myself and I also feel my limitations that I have right now. Like I can't climb super, super steep stuff. Like I can get my hands and my legs on all the places and then I try to bring them back together and I feel like I'm like, all right, activate. It's like, it doesn't activate. And I can climb up to a certain steepness, but beyond that, it's about my abs. Yeah. I mean, I gained 70 pounds. I gave birth to basically a 6 and 8 pound baby at the same time. So, I still have a giant fissure between my abs and I can climb a lot and climb pretty hard, but there are certain things that just don't work as well. And to try to catch myself early to not be disappointed, but also know that I make choices with that in mind. Does that make sense? Like even if I'm at the climbing gym, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to go up there. Or if I'm, out at a crag or I'm mixed climbing and I'm looking at things and I'm saying, this is where I'm going to be successful and be really psyched and be jazzed on myself. And this is where I can push myself, but that's where I'm going to feel like crap.
Having imposed on ourselves this idea that we need to climb in a certain way, or we need to get back to something, or we need to lead, or we need to do XYZ thing in order to really be a climber. This is more of like an identity crisis, right? And of course that changes as a parent because I just don't have access to climbing the way I did before. And so by my previous definition, I'm not really a climber right now, and I thought it was interesting that you have allowed yourself to redefine it.
Absolutely. I think that we have this opportunity to say, I'm a climber because that's my community. I'm a climber because, I've been a climber when I had double back surgeries and I didn't climb at all for 8 months. And so I think we need to cut ourselves some slack and include ourselves in this community that we've built and this sport that we've built for ourselves and our passion. When I get most frustrated is when I get most rigid about what I should, right? Like, well, I should be climbing, out ice climbing 4 days a week. And inevitably what happens is like one of my kids doesn't sleep or someone gets sick and they call from school or whatever. And it's like, well, that didn't happen, right? So versus having this kind of fuzzy goal in front of me that says, climbing is important. I do it whenever I can. I train for it. I'm a climber. And that lets me have success. And I think we all, and you're in a different stage, right? Like you have a 2-year-old and there are like all these different pieces at work. Like when my kids finally started going to school in a consistent way, it was groundbreaking for me, right? But also because I could then go and climb, but I climb now for much shorter windows of time. And I love that, to be honest. Like, I feel like I should say, oh, I really miss climbing for huge days and days out. No, I love going out for efficient climbing sessions. It's awesome. You can get way more done.
When the twins were younger, did you take them to the crag?
Not when they were really little. I tried to take the kids. I was remembering this the other day. I think they were like 3 months old. And I thought, okay, I'll take them to this crag that's here in Jackson. And it's, it's only a 20-minute walk. Well, it's a lot more than a 20-minute walk when you have 2-3 months old and they're in chest carriers. And, then you get them there and then they're not very happy. And it was such a disaster that my desire to pack up my kids and take them to the crag it's like, well, no way. We went on a big climbing trip to the Red when they were about 4 months old. Also a disaster. So, for us, it was when they were old enough to want to climb themselves is when we started going to the crag as a family.
I've seen that your kiddos are climbing now. Can you tell us a little about that and what that's been like for you?
They have different levels of passion about it. And they're at this age where they want more independence. Like, well, when do I get to do that? Or, when do I get to belay is a big conversation right now. It's like, well, I want to belay mom. Well, yeah, we're not really there and we're not going to be there. And, the nice thing for Peter and I is because we're both climbers to be able to talk about what our plan is for that. It's really nice to have that bounce board and that mutuality with it. We distinguish between a family climbing day and a kid climbing day. So a family climbing day, we all know is when we're all going to climb and each of us is going to try to climb for ourselves as well as together. And a kid climbing day is we're just going to a place where it's all about the kids climbing.
Is there a climb that you've done as a parent that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, there are different things that come to mind. Like I've done some of my hardest ice climbs since becoming a parent. And I'm super...
Why?
don't tell anyone, but ice climbing is easier than rock climbing. Everyone's going to start ice climbing now that I told you all. I've had a bunch of really significant ice ascents, a lot of first female ice ascents around here that I get super jazzed on because they're really fun. And it always blows me away that so few women are in the ice climbing milieu or have been long enough to do some of those ascents, even now, right? Like I look at it and think, seriously, like, didn't this happen 20 years ago? Didn't this happen 10 years ago? But that's not the case. So I get proud of those. And I'm really intrigued by it.
Good. This is a heavy topic, so get ready.
All right.
I had a birth plan and nothing went as planned. I went past my due date and had to be induced. As someone who loves a challenge, I wanted to have an unmedicated birth, and I did end up giving birth vaginally, but we spent 5 days in the hospital and we left absolutely exhausted, and I felt so much shame over not having been able to be a strong enough woman to have had the labor and delivery experience I wanted. And then on top of that shame, I felt guilt, because who was I to have that shame when I had left the hospital with a healthy baby?
Yeah, I love how you put it like that, Allison, like the sandwich of the shame and then the guilt for feeling that. And also I think for me, my labor and delivery story, which I'll share in a moment, I still struggle with that. And it's coupled with me with this intellectualized concept of, I had healthy babies. I'm so lucky. There shouldn't be such a thing as C-section shame, or you should just be grateful. So there's a concept and then there's the reality, right? Because the reality is, wow, this is really tricky. And for me, I did not have a birth plan, because when I found out I was pregnant with twins, it was like, I'm not driving this, right? This giant belly is driving this. So if I went from thinking I was going to climb throughout my pregnancy to just walking probably when I was like 5 months pregnant, that's all I was doing, to having to lie down largely for the last month and a half of my pregnancy because I had so many contractions. So the idea was like, keep them in, right? Like keep them in as long as possible, because that's how you can have healthy babies. And then I was having all these contractions. So people thought when it was time, they're just going to come on out. That was not how it happened. And instead, I had to be induced because I was at kind of capacity for twin pregnancy. And I have a non-compliant cervix. My cervix was like, I want those babies, that they're not coming out of here. And no matter what we did, like 42 hours of trying really hard, I ended up getting a really bad fever during labor, going down the road to suddenly having a C-section. And then it's like, boom, you're going to the operating room. And I couldn't breathe. And my face was like, felt really tight and heavy from all the meds. But for me, I was relieved in the moment, but it was like afterwards that really crushed me. And it was like, to this day, if I watch something on TV and I see sort of an enacted vaginal birth, it's hard for me not to cry. And then that's when I have the guilt, shame, sort of embarrassment, like intellectualized embarrassment about that. And I think it's also a deeply personal thing, and it's a big ache to get over. And I think that it's really, really tricky, and it's really, really hard. And I've practiced really a lot saying giving birth. For a long time, I couldn't say giving birth. I'd be like, when I had my C-section. And it's like, you know what? I gave birth to those babies. They may have come out through a slice in my stomach, but I gave birth to those babies. So I nursed my kids for 2 years. And Peter, my husband, is the one who said, I think one of the reasons nursing is so important to you is like, you get this connection that you feel like you didn't have through having them in a vaginal birth. And I think there was some level of that, right? It's like, I can do this. This is this thing that my body is doing, and I have these puzzle pieces. And I think that became more important to me.
Can you give us the down and dirty, the like step by step for successfully pumping while you're guiding?
Oh my
ice?
gosh. Well, yeah. So like the kids were 6 months old, or less than 6 months old, when I started ice climbing. So I had to be pumping. So I like modified all these tops and just like cut them, so that I would have access, and I'd wear my nursing kind of holster so I could be because I had to be hands free, right? Because my hands would get so cold. So I'd have that always like lassoed around my stomach. So then I'd unzip everything, and then I'd shove the cups in and pull them up through the holster, and they were freezing, and then you kind of strap all in, and then you'd attach to the pump. And so I had to finesse all of that at the same time. So then I'd have like this giant jacket, and then I'd sit there eating and drinking, and then you don't have to have any ice to keep your milk cold. Total win. That was the only win. And then I'd, pump and package it and do it again 4 hours later. It's such a commitment to not only nurse, but to nurse and be a mobile parent and to figure that out. And it's amazing. Like now I hear about all these great ways that companies are supporting women to do this. It's like really phenomenal. You know,
spaces at marathons.
Yeah, even spaces the spaces that they have now at airports weren't there when I was nursing. So, yeah.
In More, you describe your reality as a vortex of climbing, parenting, childcare, partnership, wanting to be wholly in one place but forever split. Now, do you have any wisdom to share, or have you heard any wisdom about balance that you think could be helpful?
I generally think balance is BS. I think we've all been sold this bill of goods to look for balance, but no one's ever talked about what balance means, and it becomes ephemeral. You can't get there. So then you're never successful. And I think like we need to redefine it. What if balance is just the fact that you touched all these parts of your life that day, right? Maybe it's because you did a 15-minute core workout and that ticked the box for you as an athlete, but you had an amazing moment of connection with your son. We need to stop thinking that balance is perfection. It's just, do I feel right now like me? And can I give myself permission that what I did today was enough? And I think that's a different thing to seek out than to go after some nebulous concept of balance.
Do you have any words of wisdom for climber parents who might be injured with young kids?
I just think, it's these unspoken pieces of the puzzle, that it's not just having kids. Think about it. You are sick more, you're getting crappy sleep, your recovery is not as good. There are all these other things that are happening. So just breathe and know that so many more of us are on that same journey. We might not talk about it, but we're sure trying to. And I think lifelong climbing, I think is a story of injury and recovery and grace, and injury and recovery and grace. And if we have to see it as that story, because otherwise we're not including the people who that's been the case. And I think that's most of us.
Your injury, recovery, grace reminds me of attachment and, not getting attached, because when things are going really well with my toddler and with my partner and our family, I'm like, oh, this is so great. And I know that tomorrow it could be different, right? And that helps me actually when the next day it's different, because letting go of the attachment, right? And knowing that things will change, that everything is just a stage.
Yeah.
This conversation is going to be really helpful for me as I settle into my new role as a parent.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for
really
your time.
I totally appreciate it. Yeah.